The pristine sky was a limpid blue, with traces of silky clouds over the savannah. In contemplating this sight, anyone could have felt themselves to be a poet, instead of what they were, hard-working men who had been digging the soil for 4 years and would for many more to come, in order to build a long road across those beautiful plains. The sun pressed down hard upon them, and sweat poured down their exhausted bodies. They constantly trembled from fevers, despite taking quinine for the malaria. Some men had left before the year was out because they couldn't cope with the terrible conditions, and most of them went to the villages during the rainy season. New workers were randomly recruited by the foreman every year during the festivals. Papa wished to have some respite after years of hard work. Leaving behind the savannah and the jungle, he went to the village of Sogamoso. There he had a lot of time to kill during the long periods of rain and heavy skies. He thought about his job and his future. The money wasn't that bad, and if he saved his salary, he might establish his own pharmacy one day. That was his dream. He thought deeply about his own father, and on impulse decided to go visit him. Grandpa was a very eccentric man. He was himself well versed in chemistry and pharmacy, living like a hermit in the tiny village of El Espino, a village very difficult to reach, even now. He was there, sitting very still in a chair, reclining against the wall, almost levitating, staring at the snow on top of the huge mountain range of El Cocuy. When he saw my father, he opened his mouth in disbelief and exclaimed, "By God, are you real or am I dreaming? How happy I am to see you. We should celebrate the occasion." Swivelling out of his chair, Grandpa went inside the pharmacy, murmuring, "This is the right opportunity to open this special bottle. Well, my son, tell me, what makes you come this far? I thought many times of you in that bloody jungle. I am so glad to see you well and content. Cheers, cheers." They toasted each other several times and embraced one another many more times until they were blind drunk and collapsed into bed until next day. The hangover lingered for a while, but Grandpa made one of his miraculous potions, and as they drank it, they started to feel better. Yet their stomachs grumbled continuously. "I think we are hungry," Grandpa said, "and if we hurry, we could get the bread just as it comes out from the oven." Papa could not believe his eyes when he saw the round and beautiful loaves. The smell of cornbread evoked his childhood. How long since I tasted one of those with fresh cheese? He salivated. "Well now, shall we have some chicken soup with potatoes?" They went to the tavern. "Son, while you are here, you should gain some weight. To be honest, you look too skinny. In this village, we eat well. Everything comes from the farm to the kitchen, then straight to the table. Doña Rosario is the cook in our only tavern. She is the best I have ever known. She is the one that looks after me. You are my guest. Everything is on me." Papa nodded. "Thank you, mi viejito. I appreciate your concern very much," he said, and carried on devouring his food with gusto. They were the spitting image of each other. The same wavy black hair, aquiline nose, slim lips, but above all, those eyes of darkest brown and greatly expressive faces showing their identical passionate characters. People in the tavern smiled at them in welcome. In Grandpa's pharmacy, Papa was in his element, rummaging in boxes for bottles to be filled with syrups. He prepared salves, small cases with pills, and made little parcels of medicines. He had not felt so happy in years. After all, this was where he had spent his youth. but in those days mainly cleaning, sterilising and making everything ready for his father. Yet now it was as if he was in charge, and Grandpa helped him out proudly, watching him. "I would like to take as many remedies as I can with me," said my father. "Obviously some products won't last long, but I will make sure I make good use of them before they expire. You cannot imagine the need of the people so isolated out there in the jungle. Mind you, there is a healer who is quite good, but he only comes by once in a while. His cures are made from herbs and they are very powerful." The politicians seldom visited remote places like this village, but a delegation was expected at the weekend. The village people were hurriedly organising tables and chairs in the middle of the church square. My grandpa and my father watched them from the pharmacy. "Believe in politicians, not me," Grandpa said. "If they are coming, it is because they want something from us. I have got a vague idea of what this is all about. You know, I always thought that in those mountains there are many precious minerals and international companies would come to get their hands on them. They are appalling. They do not have a shred of compassion. The only thing they know is greed. As soon as they fill their coffers, they go, leaving behind devastation. First thing they do is get the politicians involved, and then the exploitation commences. The locals do not benefit at all." Papa chuckled and winked. "You're quite right, but do you reckon we should be there tomorrow? They may be counting on you as an important person in the village." Grandpa stopped pacing and looked at him. "So, tomorrow very early we leave. I am not going to bother listening to their hypocritical and implausible speeches. Instead, we'll go for a picnic, one that will last a few days. We will take the mules. They can carry all we need, and they are the best animals to go up to the beautiful mountains. This is your holiday after all, and mine." What a magical feeling it was to be there for the awakening of the sun. They gazed at the snowy mountains while savouring the first sip of steaming coffee, excitedly anticipating reaching the peaks. The mules were loaded and the cocks were crowing to welcome the new day. They left the pharmacy with the mules, crossing the central square, and left the village behind. After a few kilometres, the last tiny house disappeared from view before they started to climb the rugged path. The snow-covered mountains stood like giants beckoning the travellers with all their might, as if to give them the courage to continue up and up to the summit. They travelled for a whole morning, breathing in the thin, icy air. My father was the first to come to an abrupt halt. He dismounted his mule and placed a straw mat under the shade of an old oak tree. "My nose is bleeding and I'm feeling dizzy." Grandpa sat next to him and poured a hot drink from the thermos. "You might find the taste of it unusual, but it will help you with the headache. It is something that the locals use. You have been living for a long time in the plains, almost at sea level, but here we are at 4,000 metres. The change is too much and too quick for you to bear. It is better if you lie down for a while, then we will eat and have a good nap." He pointed at the mountains, saying, "That Almighty One will look after us while we sleep." When the burning pain had soothed in his head, Papa removed the hat from his face and rolled over on one side of his body. He was still suffering the effects of high altitude. When he opened his eyes, he saw a long line of red ants carrying large leaves. "They look strong and like enormous moving rubies," he thought. In fact, they were very powerful, and each of them could carry 20 times the weight of its own body. He whispered to Grandpa, I think it would be better if we moved to another place. We are surrounded by ants, and if we are going to have our picnic, better not be in their way. Look at their anthill. It's massive, just like a replica of the mountains in miniature. In the afternoon, they carried on with their journey, whistling, with my father telling the stories from his work in the savannah, all of which was like a mystery to Grandpa. That night, they slept in an open shelter that had already been built at the foot of the mountains. In the morning, heavy grey curtains of fog enveloped the landscape in mystery. The mules had grazed on the dew-covered grasses for breakfast and had drunk rainwater from the puddles. The travellers were under the fragile open shelter, wrapped up in their blankets. They were sitting near the embers and enjoying their goat's cheese with cornbread and hot agua panela, talking about the chilly night. Grandpa and Papa stretched their bodies and scratched their backs against the pine poles. That was the best massage they could get after the rough night. Not until midday would some beams of light illuminate the hut. The next bit of the journey was very difficult. They encountered some terrifying cliffs, but the mules got them safely to a place where they could rest, and from there they could count 18 snowy peaks of the colossal glacier-covered mountains. A magnificent view. Once they had put their tent up, they left the mules to rest and went for a walk to get some sticks to light a fire. They could hear a waterfall in the distance. Tomorrow we will reach that waterfall where we can have a splendid shower. It is the most energizing thing I know. It will take away all our tiredness, Grandpa said. That night it was his turn to tell the stories, and one of them went like this. La Madre Monte was a tall and elegant woman whose face was partly hidden by a big hat made of feathers and leaves, and her body was all covered in moss. Around her neck and over her right shoulder lay a little fawn. She was the protector of the forest, plants and animals. She terrorized those that harmed nature by leading them into a deep sleep in which they dreamed of an impenetrable jungle where they were devoured by wild animals. When her victims woke, they would find themselves totally lost and would run as quickly as they could out of the forest. Legend had it that La Madre Monte loved to have baths, and when she bathed in the waters, she caused terrible floods. Listening to these tales, Papa felt like a child again, and that night they both rested and slept like logs. First thing in the morning, they saw the condor, and being totally beguiled by its splendid flight, they started to sing the song, The Condor Gone By, and like two youngsters they laid flat on the ground until the great bird went behind the sublime mountains. The condor is legendary in our history, Grandpa said. It belongs to the Andes, and it is the greatest bird in the whole wide world. They followed the sound of the rumbling torrent of water, looking forward to finding the waterfall. All of a sudden, they heard a distinct gunshot in the air. They frowned, disconcerted, both saying at the same time, "What the hell is that?" "Ah, it must be the bloody hunters," Grandpa grumbled. "I am telling you, this region attracts those who hunt bears, deer, eagles, and the condor. It is horrible. Obviously, they get a lot of money for the fur and feathers of those precious and rare animals. If they continue to hunt them down at this rate, they will soon be extinct." Eventually, the waterfall was in full display. The cascade of water was inviting. My father was eager to get in to have an exhilarating shower. Grandpa suggested, "No, there is no rush. We have all day." "Come on," Papa said. "I haven't been in one of these for ages." And taking his clothes off, he plunged in. Meanwhile, Grandpa lit a fire and boiled water for coffee and started to cook some soup. Suddenly, he saw right in front of him, on the other side of the waterfall, a spectacular bear, a big one, which seemed to be engrossed in eating some berries. Shivering like a leaf, Papa came out of the water, saying, "The water is absolutely freezing. So stimulating, though. I am starving." "Good, the soup will be ready soon." Sitting close to the fire and chewing some salchichon, Grandpa said, "I have been thinking about telling you this for a long while. Do you remember when my brother and I were about 9 and 8 and there was chaos in the church over the women's shawls?" "Yes, how can I not? That was awfully funny. So here we are talking about something that happened almost 20 years ago." "I am going to tell you what really happened," Papa said. "I think Daniel put the idea in my head, and I thought it was a good one. We tied the fringe of one shawl to the next all the way along the whole row." Grandpa almost cried with laughter. "You were so naughty, and I never really asked you because I thought many other children were involved in it, so what was the point of asking? I think mainly you were bored because the Mass was in Latin and you couldn't understand a word of it. I remember that the women sat down for some time in the end." "But you didn't see it all," Papa said. "When Mass had finished and the women tried to get out of the church, Daniel and I were up in the choir, and from there we could see everything. At the beginning we had a laugh, then we panicked a bit because none of the women wanted to give up their shawls. They were making it worse by pulling them because the knots became tighter and tighter. Only after much chaotic pulling and shouting, someone realised that the best thing to do was to bundle the shawls together and sit outside the church and sort them out." "Aha, I can see it now," said Grandpa, still laughing as he stirred the soup. "You and Daniel stayed in the pharmacy that Sunday and gave the bottles and jars a good clean, and also you asked me if there was something else to do. Very good children, I thought. Perhaps that was why I never asked you anything about the trouble in the church." They had enjoyed the meal, and even more so in relating the stories of the past. "You can cook, Papa, very well indeed. Thank you, that was delicious." Just as they swallowed the last spoonful of soup, they heard the shots. Bang, bang, bang. Both stood up abruptly. "Damn it, not again," Grandpa shouted. "I don't like this. A few minutes ago a bear was right there. I bet those gunshots were for him. Hunters are dangerous people. Well, we cannot do anything. We will bring the mules over here and settle down for the night." The tent was high and secluded among the trees, so the mules could go inside it. To soften the beds, pine needles were put under the straw mats. Everything was ready for the night. Grandpa went to have his bath, and Papa to collect some sticks to keep the fire going. In the last rays of the sun, the snowy mountains had a red hue, and the summit of the Ritacuba Blanco shone magnificently at its 5,330-metre height. The pale moon hung over the waterfall. There was still plenty of light, so there were a few hours to wait before they could gaze at the stars in their full brightness. As he came out of the water, Grandpa shouted, "Guillermo, give me some carajillo, and then I can go to sleep as early as the chickens do. I am exhausted." Sitting around the fire, it wasn't long before Grandpa's head jerked with tiredness. Both of them swiftly fell asleep, enveloped by the warmth of the mules. Early morning, they were woken by the sound of someone yelling. When they opened the tent, it was even clearer. "Help! Help! Help!" "Bring one of the mules and the medicine chest," Grandpa ordered. "Someone is badly hurt." They found a man who had clearly been crawling for hours. He was almost unconscious. Bringing him into the tent, they treated him with great care. His leg was broken. 20 minutes or so after a potent injection was given to him and the pain had lessened, the man identified himself. "I am Manuel, and I fell into a trap that someone else set for the bears." "You must go to hospital," Papa said. "I think your femur bone is broken in two. The only thing I can do here is immobilize the leg." The man looked shocked. "I don't have anybody with me. The other hunters left me behind and went further up the mountain, not caring about me. They are all professionals. I myself have only just started to learn to hunt." "Well, our holiday has finished," Grandpa told my father. "Better get going as soon as we can, since this man needs urgent surgery. It will take a week for us to get to the hospital. I only hope his leg can be saved." The sedated man was carried on an improvised stretcher, resting on top of a mule all the way down to the village. It was a difficult journey, but somehow they managed to reach my grandpa's pharmacy in 3 days. After they had rested in El Espino for 1 day, Papa embraced my grandpa, saying, "I will try to visit you again, maybe next year during the rainy season. Now I must go with this man. He is very ill and in distress and really needs someone to accompany him to Sogamoso to have surgery." With a feeling of nostalgia, he packed all his belongings and they went, by cart. In this kind of transport, they could at least stretch their bodies. The trip took 3 days, during which Manuel told my father that he had family in Tunja and he was the eldest of 5 brothers and sisters, and that his father was dead. He contemplated his life. The worst-case scenario would be if he lost his leg. He dozed off from time to time and endured the pain. He moaned, and with the dizziness of the trip, he murmured, "The whole idea of going hunting was to have some money to help my sister pay for her wedding ceremony. Now the only thing she's going to have is a disabled brother. Life has taught me a lesson. In the future, I wish only to work with honourable people." The operation was successful, and thanks to the care he had received, his leg did not need to be amputated. And finally, he could go on crutches to his sister's wedding.